All right, guys, welcome to the Street Cop Training Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Benino. This is Zach Miller. We are talking case law today. It has been a couple weeks. We've been in the field a lot, out there teaching. Zach just did a class in Kansas. I did one in Kansas. Did I just get back from Kansas? I don't even know. Yeah, I just got back from Kansas City. I flew in. It was snowing in Kansas City. It was 74 in New Jersey. The irony is unbelievable. But anyway, we have some topics of discussion we're going to go into today. We had a little bit of a discussion prior to this before we decided to speak on the issue to make sure we're on the same page and I understand it. And Zach is the guy. So without further ado, Zach Miller.
Good to see you. Glad to be here again. It's been a while.
It has. Too long, Zach.
It has been too long.
Too long. Long lost soulmates. What are we? 7 years apart, you and I?
I think so. I think that's what we determined. Yeah.
I always went for older men, so it's very natural to me. It feels very natural. All right, so where do you want to start?
Well, since we were just talking about it, I guess this Trooper two-step debate.
Ooh, I got to tell you, this one is going to make people furious. And there is just people are just so set in their ways. And by the way, before we go into this, we are very empathetic to the idea that some courts have been so seasoned in this. This is the way it's been done, that it's going to be a hard thing trying to convince them otherwise, because we know that a lot of legal professionals are having a hard time understanding what the law says. So we're making analyses of the situation, practical advice. But, listen, if that's what they want you to do, then so be it. But we're just giving you an explanation of why it's not actually a smart idea and where it kind of falls and fails. So let's go into it. Many states, or a small minority of the states, believe that on a motor vehicle stop, before a voluntary consent can be achieved, they must perform this action, the Trooper two-step, which is they tell them the traffic stop has concluded. They hand them back their documents. They turn off their lights. They take 2 steps back and then reinitiate and reengage on the side of the road to try to create a voluntary feeling environment for the consent only. And we'll try to peel that apart and try to get into, well, when do you have to do that? And the question I had just right off the top of my head now is, are they doing it so they don't have to argue reasonable suspicion? That might be a tactic why it's being done.
Yeah. I mean, so just so that everyone understands what we're talking about here, it's a traffic stop for just a traffic infraction. We want to now transition this interaction to a voluntary contact because we've completed the traffic matter, the mission of the stop. We have not, well, let's assume for just argument's sake, we've not developed reasonable suspicion of criminal activity to extend the duration of the stop. So our last hope, if you will, to continue to investigate this, hunch that we have, perhaps, we need to transition from an investigative stop / traffic stop into a voluntary contact. And then along the way, we may try to seek consent to search the vehicle. So assuming we don't have reasonable suspicion, because if I had reasonable suspicion, I wouldn't need to do this whole thing that we're talking about. There's no need to transition this into a voluntary contact because I've got reasonable suspicion to continue and maintain this stop. So we're now done with the traffic stop. My mindset is I want to transfer this into, or transition this into a voluntary contact. So how do I do that? Well, the test is I have to make it appear objectively that a reasonable person would feel like they're free to leave. They understand the stop is over and their remaining on scene is a purely voluntary act. And as with all tests for voluntariness under the Fourth Amendment, it is assessed under a totality of the circumstances. There is no one thing, generally speaking, that will always make a contact involuntary, in other words, a seizure, or will always make it a voluntary contact. And that's where we are. That's what we're trying to determine. Telling someone. So the closest Supreme Court case that has addressed this issue is Ohio versus Robinette, which is kind of an outlier of a case anyway. I haven't read it in a while, but there's just not a lot to it, and I think the Supreme Court didn't really answer the question that the lower court, that the petitioner had presented. But the point is, the takeaway for this is that in Robinette, the Supreme Court said, we're not even required to say you are free to leave. The magic words, you are free to leave, are not a requirement to show that a voluntary contact has occurred. I think it's a good idea. I can't think of a better way. One single thing you could do to show that this is voluntary than say you're free to leave. But so that's not even required to say you're free to leave, as long as everything else that we've done would make a reasonable person feel like they're free to leave. So what are some of the things? Obviously, giving their documents back, driver's license, registration, whatever we had. If it's a summons or a warning, we're issuing that. A reasonable person would think when these documents are given back to them, the stop has concluded. One of the things that has evolved over the years, and I remember being taught this in my basic academy, was this notion of doing the trooper two-step. So we've given all the documents back, and now we're going to demonstrate we're going to have a physical demonstration of a break-in contact, where we literally turn around, we walk back to our car, taking a couple of steps, and then we turn back around and we reapproach the driver as if we're just resetting the entire interaction. And that's what I understand the trooper two-step to be. I have yet to read, and there's lots of cases out there, but I have yet to find a single case that says that is an absolute requirement to show that this is now a voluntary contact. It's a thing you can do, but I don't know that it's required. I've yet to see it. If anybody's aware of a case, please email me, email Dennis, let me know, let me see it, let me read it. But I'd be highly surprised if there was such a case out there.
And, just like anything else, when something is developed and it I don't know, I guess it passes muster in a courtroom, it becomes the norm.
Yeah.
There are people who were taught this forever and performed it and created this hectic issue now of, oh, it doesn't look like the last time. So now you got to start over again. We have to reset and say, and hopefully get a prosecutor smart enough, which is probably close to never going to happen. And no, it's just the truth. I mean, I don't care. You don't have to say it. I'll say it. Just the fucking truth. So, to understand this stuff and apply it. And by the way, not only just a prosecutor who actually knows what they're talking about, but then to be in the position to argue such a case. Right. So, I mean, you may have some high end, maybe U.S. attorneys, and I'm saying because you're a U.S. attorney that you actually know what you're talking about. I'm saying the ones that they're shuffling around from district to district to argue the important stuff, like the 3 to 5 in the whole United States that they constantly have to move around. Like when they did the El Chapo trial, they went all over the country to find some real winners. I think they only came up with 3 names out of all the U.S. attorneys. They found 3 they needed to come and argue and convict El Chapo. So, to understand the factors of voluntary consent and argue it correctly. And by the way, this is the dynamic of this company. So I'm very comfortable being uncomfortable. We have said things against these